You ever watch someone shatter your child's joy right in front of you, just to make a point? That's exactly what my mother-in-law did, and the worst part? She didn't even try to hide it. Let me tell you what happened. I'm Harper Winslow, married to Graham, and we have an 11-year-old daughter named Tessa. Our family is pretty normal, but there's always been tension with my mother-in-law, Lorraine. She's got a clear favorite, her other grandchildren from Graham's sister. They always seem to get the best gifts and all the attention, while Tessa and I try to stay out of the way to keep things peaceful. I didn't want Tessa to feel caught in the middle, so I usually kept quiet and tried to keep the peace. But this Christmas was different. Lorraine announced weeks before the holiday that she was going to give every one of her grandkids the brand new iPhone 16 Pro Max. It was a big deal because those phones are expensive and hard to get. Everyone in the family was talking about it, and Tessa was so excited. She kept asking if she could open hers early and couldn't stop imagining what it would be like to have one just like her cousins. On the day of the family gathering at Lorraine's big house, the mood was festive, and the whole room was buzzing. Lorraine made sure everyone sat in a circle and insisted we open gifts one by one, so everyone could see the smiles. Tessa was beaming, watching her cousins Braden, Isla, and Maren each unwrap a shiny box with the Apple logo right on it. Her eyes sparkled with hope and happiness. Then it was Tessa's turn. She carefully opened her gift, expecting the same shiny box. But inside, there was only a hoodie, a clearance store hoodie, 2 sizes too big. You could hear the silence drop like a stone. I saw the confused and awkward looks from the other relatives, and Tessa tried so hard to hide her disappointment with a small smile. My heart broke, but I didn't say a word. I just sat there, feeling humiliated. It wasn't the first time Lorraine had shown favoritism, but this time it was so public and cruel. I kept telling myself to stay calm, for Tessa's sake. She deserves to feel loved and important. I just hoped this wouldn't leave a mark on her. But deep down, I knew this Christmas was going to be one we'd never forget, for all the wrong reasons. Christmas morning at Lorraine's big house was buzzing with energy. The tree was covered in twinkling lights and colorful ornaments, and the smell of cinnamon and fresh pine filled the air. Relatives filled the spacious living room, laughing and chatting as they gathered around the fireplace. Lorraine was clearly excited, making sure everyone was seated and ready. Then she announced, "We're going to open gifts one at a time, so we can see all the smiles." Tessa's eyes lit up when she heard that. She loved Christmas mornings, the wrapping paper, the surprises. But most of all, she loved seeing the happy faces of her cousins. Braden, Isla, and Maren were all eagerly waiting too. Lorraine's other grandchildren were used to getting special treatment, and today was no different. Each cousin had a neatly wrapped box sitting in front of them, all the same size and shape. Harper noticed how bright and shiny the boxes looked, with the Apple logo clearly visible. It was obvious these were the new iPhone 16 Pro Max phones Lorraine had been bragging about for weeks. One by one, Braden, then Isla, then Maren carefully peeled back the wrapping paper. Their faces lit up as they saw the sleek phone boxes inside. "Wow," Tessa whispered, clutching her hands nervously. She smiled wide, watching them carefully, imagining what it would be like to hold one herself. Finally, it was Tessa's turn. Lorraine handed her a box that was different from the others, smaller and wrapped with cheaper paper. Harper could feel her heart start to race as Tessa slowly tore away the wrapping. Inside was not a shiny phone box, but a plain clearance store hoodie, way too big for her. The color was dull, nothing like the excitement Tessa had felt just moments ago. For a moment, the room went completely quiet. Harper caught the looks exchanged between some of the relatives, a mix of confusion and awkwardness. Tessa's face tightened, but she quickly forced a smile and hugged the hoodie close like it was exactly what she wanted. Harper's throat tightened. The sting of humiliation hit her hard, but she kept quiet, not wanting to ruin the moment for Tessa. Tessa's cousins continued to look at her, their smiles fading as they noticed the difference in gift. The joyful mood dropped slightly, replaced by a heavy awkwardness that filled the room. Lorraine smiled faintly but said nothing, clearly expecting everyone to just move on. Harper could see the hurt in Tessa's eyes, but the little girl bravely stayed silent, not wanting to draw attention to herself. Harper's mind raced, trying to figure out how to explain this later without breaking her daughter's spirit. She knew that Lorraine's gift wasn't just about the hoodie. It was a clear message. But for now, Harper bit her tongue and held back her feeling. She wanted to protect Tessa's happiness as much as she could, even if it meant swallowing the bitter truth herself. The rest of the gift opening passed in a quiet blur. Everyone seemed to avoid looking at Tessa or mentioning the hoodie. Harper wished she could take it all away, but she stayed strong. She promised herself she would find a way to make things right for Tessa, and that this wouldn't be the last Christmas they would share. After the gifts were all opened and the awkward silence finally faded, I found a quiet moment to pull Lorraine aside. My heart was pounding, but I needed answers. Why didn't Tessa get the same gift as the others? I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. Lorraine looked me up and down with a cold, unreadable expression. Because she's not responsible enough for something like that, she said sharply. I'm not wasting $1,200 on a kid who'll probably drop it in a week. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. Tessa, not responsible enough? I thought about my daughter, how she carefully handled her things, how she got straight A's at school, and how mature she was for her age. Lorraine's excuse wasn't just wrong, it was insulting. I opened my mouth to argue, but Graham stood nearby, his face tight and uncomfortable. He didn't say a word. I could tell he wanted to, but something was holding him back. Maybe it was fear of upsetting his mother, or maybe he didn't want to pick a fight during the holiday. Either way, his silence felt like a betrayal. It left me standing alone, facing Lorraine's harsh judgment. Lorraine's eyes narrowed as she continued, her tone dripping with something deeper than concern for Tessa's responsibility. It was resentment, directed not just at my daughter, but at me. Using Tessa as a way to send a message, to punish me without saying it out loud. I swallowed the lump in my throat and forced myself to stay composed. I knew arguing wouldn't change Lorraine's mind. Instead, I quietly walked back to Tessa, who was sitting on the couch, still clutching the oversized hoodie. Her smile had faded, replaced by a look of confusion and hurt. I wanted to tell her it wasn't her fault, that she was loved and valued. But Lorraine's words echoed in my mind, making it hard to find the right things to say. How do you explain cruelty disguised as responsibility to an 11-year-old? Later that day, I talked to Graham again, hoping he would see what was happening and support us. He admitted he felt caught between his mother and me, unsure how to handle the situation. But I needed more than his uncertainty. I needed action. That night, as I tucked Tessa into bed, I promised her I would protect her from this kind of treatment. She deserved to feel proud and loved, not second best because of someone else's bitterness. Lorraine's words weren't just about a hoodie or a phone. They were about control and power, and how she was trying to use my daughter to get under my skin. But I wasn't going to let her win. From that moment, I knew things had to change. I wouldn't let Tessa grow up feeling less than her cousins because of a bitter grandmother. And I wouldn't stay silent while Lorraine treated my family like this. The cold answer I got that day opened my eyes to just how deep the problem was, and how much I had to fight back to protect my daughter's happiness. The ride home was quiet, the kind of silence that feels heavy and uncomfortable. Tessa sat beside me in the back seat, her fingers nervously playing with the hem of her too-big hoodie. I could tell she was holding back tears, trying to be brave. After a few minutes, she finally whispered, "Mom, why doesn't Grandma like me?" That question broke something inside me. My heart felt like it cracked in two. How do you explain to your child that the person who's supposed to love her unconditionally was using her to hurt you? I reached over and gently squeezed her hand, trying to find the right words. "Sweetheart, Grandma loves you in her own way. Sometimes grown-ups don't show love the right way, but that doesn't mean you're not special." Tessa nodded quietly, but I could see the doubt in her eyes. Her trust was shaken, and it crushed me. I wanted to protect her from this pain, to make it all better, but I knew this was bigger than just hurt feeling. Graham was driving, his jaw tight as he glanced at me through the rearview mirror. He tried to explain, "Mom has old-fashioned values. She thinks kids shouldn't get expensive things too young. Maybe you're overreacting, Harper." His words felt like a slap. Overreacting? Was I wrong to be upset when my daughter was treated like she didn't matter? I bit back my frustration because I knew this wasn't just about the gift. It was about respect, about how my daughter was being treated by her own grandmother. That night, after tucking Tessa into bed and kissing her forehead, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The hoodie sat folded on her dresser, a reminder of what happened that day. I couldn't stop thinking about Lorraine's words and cold attitude. This wasn't just a careless mistake or a misunderstanding. It was deliberate. It wasn't about a phone or a piece of clothing. It was about making a statement, showing who was favored and who wasn't. And worse, it was about using my daughter to send that message. My mind raced with the unfairness of it all. I thought about all the times I tried to keep the peace, to smooth things over for Tessa's sake. But peace shouldn't come at the cost of dignity. How could I let my daughter grow up feeling less loved, less worthy? As the house grew quiet around me, I realized this was a turning point. I couldn't let Lorraine's bitterness define our family. I had to stand up, not just for myself, but for Tessa. I promised myself I would protect her from this kind of pain and show her she deserves better. That night, I made a silent vow. Things would change. This wasn't just about a phone anymore. It was about respect, about love, about making sure my daughter never feels less than she truly is. And I knew that to protect Tessa, I had to be stronger than ever. It had been a week since that awful Christmas day, but the hurt still felt fresh. I tried to put on a brave face for Tessa, to keep things normal. But deep down, the anger was building, simmering just beneath the surface. Then one afternoon, everything changed. I was in the kitchen when I heard Lorraine's voice coming from the living room, clearly on the phone. At first, I thought she was talking about something harmless, but then her words stopped me cold. "She's teaching Harper's brat some humility," Lorraine said with a proud laugh. "Good girls don't get what they want just because they whine. That's how you keep them in line." I froze. My blood turned cold. The cruel truth hit me like a hammer. This was never about whether Tessa could handle a phone or not. It was about hurting me, using my daughter as a weapon to get at me. The betrayal stung deeper than I expected. Lorraine wasn't hiding her spite. She was bragging about it, about making Tessa feel small on purpose, just to punish me. The realization shook me to my core. For years, I had tried to keep peace to avoid conflict. I thought if I stayed quiet and polite, things might improve. But now I saw clearly that my kindness had been mistaken for weakness. Lorraine wasn't going to change, and if I kept letting her get away with this, my daughter would keep paying the price. I took a deep breath and told myself, enough. I was done being polite. Done pretending this was normal family drama. This was cruelty, plain and simple, and it needed to stop. That night, I started making plans. I wasn't going to stoop to Lorraine's level by being mean or yelling, but I would make sure she felt the sting of exclusion and humiliation in return. I would show her what it feels like to be shut out, to have her cruelty turned back on. I thought about her upcoming 70th birthday party, something she'd been bragging about for months. She expected us to host it, to make everything perfect for her. But I had a different idea. If she wanted to treat us like outsiders, then I would make her feel that way in front of everyone she cared about. I began quietly reaching out to family members, telling them the truth about what happened at Christmas. I wasn't asking for sympathy or support. I just wanted the family to see Lorraine for who she really was. I wanted them to understand why I was backing out of hosting the party. The thought of confronting her terrified me, but I knew it was necessary. If I stayed silent, this would never end. My daughter deserved better. I deserved respect. And Lorraine needed to learn that actions have consequences. By the end of the week, I felt a strange mix of fear and relief. Fear of what Lorraine might say or do, but relief that I was finally standing up for myself and my daughter. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was taking control again. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I was ready to fight. Not with anger or cruelty, but with quiet strength. Lorraine had made her choice. Now it was my turn to show her what that choice really meant. Lorraine's 70th birthday was supposed to be a big celebration. She'd been talking about it nonstop for months. The guest list, the decorations, the food. She wanted everything perfect, and my husband Graham and I were the lucky hosts. Our house was the perfect size for the crowd she expected, and we had agreed early on to make it happen. I thought it was a chance to keep things civil, to maybe patch some of the cracks in our family relationship. But after what happened at Christmas, everything felt different. The hurt and humiliation Lorraine had caused Tessa still weighed heavily on me. I couldn't shake the image of my daughter opening that awful gift, trying so hard to hide her disappointment while everyone else beamed over their new phone. And worse, knowing Lorraine had said those cruel things about Tessa being irresponsible, it made my blood boil all over again. The more I thought about hosting that party, the more I realized I just couldn't. I didn't want to put a smile on my face while pretending everything was okay. I didn't want to be in the same room as Lorraine, pretending that nothing had happened. I knew if I went through with it, I'd be carrying a secret pain and anger all night long, and that wouldn't do anyone any good. So I made a decision. I was going to cancel hosting the party at our house. But I didn't want to just back out quietly. Lorraine had used her cruelty like a weapon against me and Tessa, and now it was time for the family to see the truth. I wanted them to know exactly what she had done, not to shame her, but so they could understand why I couldn't be a part of her big day. Over the next few days, I started reaching out to relatives, one by one, quietly, without causing a scene. I called aunts, uncles, cousins. Some I hadn't spoken to in a while. I told them about Christmas morning, about the phone gifts to all the grandkids except Tessa, and the terrible hoodie she got instead. I explained how Lorraine had said hurtful things about Tessa's responsibility, and how Graham had stayed silent. It wasn't easy sharing all of that. I wanted to protect Tessa's feelings, and I didn't want to make Lorraine look bad without giving her a chance to explain. But I also couldn't let the family pretend nothing had happened. They deserved to hear the truth, especially since they were all expected to be at the party. Most of the relatives I talked to were shocked. Some said they'd noticed Lorraine's favoritism before, but hadn't realized how deep it ran. Others were upset that Graham hadn't stood up for us. A few thanked me for telling them honestly. It felt like a small weight was lifting off my chest, knowing I wasn't carrying this alone anymore. Meanwhile, I told Graham about my plan. He was hesitant, worried about causing drama, but deep down I think he understood. He knew how much I'd been hurt, and he could see that I wasn't going to pretend anymore. Finally, the day came when I told Lorraine. I kept my voice calm but firm as I said we wouldn't be hosting the party. I told her she could find another place to celebrate, that I wasn't willing to share my home with someone who treated my daughter that way. Lorraine was furious, but this time, I stood my ground. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one where I wasn't afraid to protect my family, no matter the cost. The phone rang late that afternoon, and when I saw Lorraine's name flashing on the screen, I already knew what this was about. The moment she found out I had canceled hosting her 70th birthday party, there was no way she'd let it slide quietly. Her voice was sharp, filled with anger the second she started speaking. How dare you cancel? After everything I've done for this family? You don't get to just back out like that, Harper. You're going to ruin everything. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. I had rehearsed what I wanted to say so many times in my head. Lorraine, I said calmly, if you think humiliating my daughter is acceptable, then you can find another place to celebrate. There was a stunned silence on the other end before she snapped. You're threatening to take away family events from me? You're out of line. I didn't hesitate. You already cut my daughter off. I'm just making it official. The words hung heavy between us, and I could almost hear her heart hardening through the phone. Lorraine wasn't used to being confronted like this, especially by me. She was the matriarch, the one who made the rules. But I wasn't going to let her continue to treat my daughter like she didn't matter. Lorraine's voice dropped to a cold threat. If you go through with this, you and Graham will be out of the family circle. No more holidays, no more get-togethers. You're on your own. For a moment, I felt a flicker of fear. Family meant a lot to all of us, even if it was complicated. But then I thought about Tessa's face that Christmas morning, the forced smile, the hurt in her eyes. I knew I couldn't let fear keep me silent anymore. I held firm. If this is how you see family, by excluding and humiliating my daughter, then maybe being out is where we belong. I won't watch her be treated like this any longer. That ended the call abruptly. I didn't expect it to go any other way, but it felt good to finally say what I'd been holding inside for months. Later that evening, I sat down with Graham. He was quiet, avoiding eye contact at first, but I could see the conflict in his face. He wanted to support me, but his loyalty to his mother made it hard. I'm sorry you had to deal with this, he said softly. But you know how she is. She's old-fashioned, set in her ways. She didn't mean to hurt Tessa like that. I shook my head. That's not good enough anymore, Graham. This isn't just about old-fashioned values or misunderstandings. It's about respect, about how my daughter deserves to be treated with kindness and fairness. He sighed heavily. I know, and I hate that I didn't stand up for you both when I should have. It's just difficult. She's my mom. I get that, I said gently. But you have to choose what kind of family we want to be. One where we protect each other, or one where we let cruelty slide. For the first time, I saw a flicker of understanding in his eyes. He wasn't ready to confront his mother fully, but he knew things had to change. I wasn't asking for perfection, just for respect. And if Lorraine couldn't give that, then maybe it was time to make some tough decisions, for Tessa's sake, and for ours. Lorraine's 70th birthday party went ahead at her house, but it was nothing like the warm celebration she had hoped for. The grand decorations and fancy catering couldn't hide the tension that filled the room. It was clear that something had shifted, and everyone seemed to feel it. Almost as soon as the guests arrived, whispers started spreading. A few relatives who had heard what happened at Christmas weren't willing to let it slide. One cousin cornered Lorraine quietly, asking why she had treated Tessa so differently. Lorraine tried to laugh it off, saying Harper was just too sensitive and reading too much into things. But her words didn't sound convincing. Another aunt, usually loyal to Lorraine, spoke up firmly in front of a small group. It wasn't just a small thing. Singling out an 11-year-old girl while giving all the other grandkids expensive gifts? That's cruel, Lorraine. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried enough weight to make a few heads turn. As the evening went on, more people approached Lorraine with questions and quiet criticism. Some relatives admitted they had noticed Lorraine's favoritism before, but had never said anything. Now they weren't so sure they wanted to stay silent. The image of Lorraine as the kind and loving matriarch began to crack. Harper watched from across the room as Lorraine struggled to keep control. There were moments when Lorraine's usual confident smile faltered, replaced by flickers of frustration and discomfort. It was as if the walls she had built around herself were starting to crumble. Several guests decided to leave early, avoiding any more awkward conversations. It was unusual for family events to end before the cake was cut, but this night was different. The early departures were noticeable and spoke volumes about how the mood had soured. Graham came over and stood beside me quietly. He looked relieved that others were finally seeing what he had struggled to admit for so long. I'm sorry it had to get like this, he whispered, but maybe this is what needed to happen. I nodded, feeling a mix of emotions. Part of me was sad that things had come to this point, but another part felt hopeful. Maybe this was the beginning of a change, not just for Lorraine, but for our whole family. Later, as the party wound down, Lorraine sat alone in a corner. The usual buzz around her was gone, replaced by an uncomfortable silence. I didn't feel joy or satisfaction. Instead, I felt a quiet sense of justice. She had pushed too hard to control everyone, and now she had to face the consequences. Tessa stayed close to me the whole night, her small hand in mine. I could see the relief in her eyes, like she finally felt protected and understood. This party was more than just a birthday now. It was a turning point for all of us. By the time we left, the family wasn't the same. The cracks in Lorraine's carefully crafted image were no longer hidden. And while the future was uncertain, I knew one thing for sure. From now on, Tessa and I would never accept being treated as less than we deserved. Months passed, and the tension that had settled over our family didn't ease. Then, one afternoon, I got a call from Graham. His voice sounded heavy, almost reluctant. He told me Lorraine's health had taken a turn for the worse. Nothing life-threatening, but enough to need some extra care. I wasn't surprised. Stress and age were catching up with her. What surprised me was the next part. Lorraine was expecting me to help. After everything that had happened, the humiliation at Christmas, the birthday party fallout, the coldness, she still wanted me to step in and care for her. I felt a sharp twist inside. How could she expect that? After all the pain she caused my daughter and me? When Lorraine called, her tone was quiet, almost pleading. She asked if I could come by to help with some errands, maybe spend some time with her. I didn't hesitate, to be honest. Help is something you give to family, I said firmly. But you made it clear Tessa and I aren't part of yours. For the first time in years, I heard silence on the other end. No excuses, no sharp remarks, just silence. I imagined Lorraine sitting there, finally facing the consequences of her action. It was a quiet moment of reckoning. I wasn't proud of feeling a little satisfaction in that silence. But after everything, after the constant coldness and favoritism, I wasn't about to let her act like nothing had happened. Later that day, Graham sat with me and Tessa, looking more serious than I'd ever seen him. I owe you both an apology, he began, voice thick with regret. I should have stood up for you sooner. I was afraid of upsetting my mother, afraid of family drama. But I'm ashamed now. You didn't deserve any of it. Tessa squeezed my hand, her eyes wide but hopeful. Hearing Graham admit his mistakes felt like a small healing balm. It didn't erase the past, but it meant things could change. We talked late into the evening about boundaries, respect, and what family should really mean. Graham promised to support us, not just in words but in actions. As I watched Tessa that night, I thought about all she'd been through, how she'd had to hide her hurt, fake smiles, and endure unfair treatment. But now, she knew she wasn't alone. We would face whatever came next together, stronger and united. The road ahead wasn't easy. Lorraine's health might need care, but that didn't mean she could treat us like strangers and still expect kindness. We had set new limits, ones built on respect, honesty, and true family. Sometimes the hardest part is recognizing when to walk away from people who hurt you, even if they're family. And sometimes it's knowing when to finally stand up and say, enough. For Tessa and me, this was that moment. The final blow wasn't a dramatic confrontation or a public scene. It was the quiet decision to protect ourselves and demand the respect we deserve. Lorraine's actions had consequences, and we were ready to live our lives without the weight of her cruelty. It was the end of one chapter and the beginning of a new, stronger one for us both. After everything that had happened, I made a choice. I decided I wouldn't yell or cause a scene. I wouldn't make dramatic confrontations or try to force apologies. Instead, I simply stopped showing up. No more visits, no more calls, no more pretending that everything was okay when it wasn't. I withdrew quietly, like a shadow slipping away. At first, Lorraine acted as if nothing had changed, but slowly I could tell she noticed. Invitations stopped coming our way. Messages went unanswered. The holiday dinners she once bragged about hosting became smaller, quieter affairs. Other family members began keeping their distance, unsure how to navigate the growing tension. It was as if her carefully maintained image of the perfect matriarch was cracking right before her eyes. Lorraine's bitterness and favoritism had alienated more people than just me and Tessa. Cousins we once saw regularly now made excuses to skip family gatherings. The warm, bustling family she loved to flaunt was slowly shrinking, and she was left staring at an empty room. Meanwhile, Tessa was growing up. She watched it all quietly, the distance, the cold shoulders, the empty seats where family used to be. But she never doubted her own worth. We talked often about respect, about what it means to be treated fairly and kindly. I made sure she knew her value didn't come from gifts or praise from others, but from who she was inside. She learned to stand tall, to trust herself, and to love without waiting for others' approval. Watching her become confident despite the coldness around us was my real victory. It was the kind of revenge no one expected. Sometimes I thought about what revenge really means. It's not always about loud confrontations or public payback. Sometimes it's about stepping back and letting people live with the consequences of their choices, letting them feel the quiet absence of love and support they took for granted. Lorraine's cruelty created a void in her life, and she had to face that emptiness every day. No words from me could hurt her as much as the loneliness she built herself. That silence was louder than any argument I could have had. In the end, I found peace in knowing I didn't stoop to her level. I didn't need to yell or scream or beg for respect. I simply chose to protect my family by walking away from the toxicity. The true revenge was in reclaiming our dignity, in teaching Tessa that kindness and respect are worth more than any gift or approval from someone who can't see her worth. That quiet decision to stop engaging was more powerful than any harsh words. It was the strongest message I could send. You can't break us, and you can't force us to stay where we aren't valued. Life moved forward, and so did we, stronger, freer, and finally unburdened by the pain someone else chose to bring. Sometimes revenge isn't loud. Sometimes it's just letting someone live with the emptiness they created. Do you think Harper made the right choice by quietly stepping away from Lorraine, or should she have kept trying to fix things? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I really want to hear from you. And if stories like this resonate with you, be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any new ones.